I think that we should go ahead maybe then and start with the monthly financial forecast then, since we're waiting on Mary Jo, and since if there's no real surprises, we can kind of get through that, and by the time she gets here, we can start then on the stuff that we need a quorum for. If that's okay with you.
Fine and dandy with me.
Again, just thank you, folks. Thank you for the flexibility. I really do appreciate everybody. I understand it's spring break. Spring break. And so, unfortunately, I was talking to Jody about, we are going to have to put together a process to look for new committee members to make sure the committee is well represented and robust, and that we have seamless transition in the future when we do need to fill these seats. So we'll be working on that. I did hesitate to want to add anybody right now, just because we had folks at our last meeting from the previous sitting of those committee members, and we're right in the middle of the process. We really have 2 meetings left, and then a cleanup meeting in June, and then July break, which would give us time then to appropriately talk to the community, get input, and get some new members, and then put together a process so we keep on top of this in the future, for the board to keep on top of this in the future. So with that, we have a few things on the calendar today. Mary Jo is running a little bit late. She either has or is having oral surgery. I did not get to talk to her, so I know she's dealing with that. And so, we'll work with the calendar of today's agenda as she gets in here. I do want to get her to vote. I think she had surgery and she's in a lot of pain. So I would like to get her to vote on our 5-year forecast so we can move forward with this and get it to the board in an appropriate time frame for our May meeting when it's due on May 31st to the state. A few other things, the personnel budget, which is sort of tied to that, as well as you'll also see in your packet of handout there a Board of Education budget detail that was provided because Board Member Hudson had asked for it, and sort of gives a historical context, that line item, and what's sort of inside it for your disposal. I didn't plan on any really outward discussion on that as part of the meeting, but if anyone did have any questions, we can definitely discuss that, or if we need to do any email or anything like that, maybe for the future as you look and digest that would be fine as well. Beyond that, we'll have our monthly financials, which I look to start here since we don't need a quorum to move that forward, is not the process for that. And we can get through that and then move right into the 5-year and the personnel. And like I said, if everything goes well, which I think it will, item 5 on the agenda, the tentative meeting date, the 25th, will not be needed. So again, I do appreciate everyone's time. It's spring break, I know, and I apologize for the meeting not being able to happen last week, and just thankful that we were all able to get together and get this done. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stan, and we'll move on to our monthly financial report.
There are no surprises, and that concludes my report. I didn't kill enough time, did I? This is year-to-date for March. March represents the 15th month of the fiscal year, or the 9th, what month it would be, 6th, 9th month of the fiscal year, 15th month. I did 12 plus 3. So we're 3/4 of the way through the year. On the revenue side, at $748 million, we're running. Just keep going. Or you want to call the meeting?
Oh, actually, yes. Let's
Sorry.
call the meeting. You're all right. It's good to see you.
Hi, good
Did
to
you
see
have
you.
surgery already?
Yes. I had it yesterday.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I am too.
Now that we have a quorum, I'll ask our treasurer to call the roll.
With a heavy sigh. My team.
Hello all.
No, not too bad.
Okay, so it's 12:15.
Cooperating.
All right, Mr. Peretti,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Zaranin,
Yes.
Ms. Hudson,
Here?
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Robinson, and Mr. Stewart. So we have 4 out of 7, so we have a quorum.
All
All
right.
right.
Okay.
Now that we have a quorum, we do have minutes in our packet of information. If you take a quick second to look at those.
I'll move we approve the minutes.
A second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, minutes are approved. Board Member Hudson, will you be able to join us for, how long do you think we'll have you today?
I have to leave around 1.
Around 1? Well, I then think that we should probably
Switch
over then to the 5-year forecast presentation.
Sorry.
So we can prove that. It's no big deal at all.
Okay.
The monthly financials is nothing, no surprises or anything like that.
Okay.
There is the breakout, the board line item breakout. I didn't plan on any discussion. We can have some, but it's more for our disposal and to follow up with any questions in the future.
Oh, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, good.
All set?
All set?
Okay, so this is our first discussion about the 5-year forecast, which is actually the May update to the October forecast. And what we've been working on is to prepare for you a mechanism here that I'll show you in a minute, to have a kind of interactive discussion about the forecast. We're at a very interesting point in time for some of the, what I call exogenous variables, most importantly the state budget, that impact this forecast. And since that state budget is not yet been decided, it's difficult to land on a number, even though we will have to land on a number. It's difficult to land on a number at this time. And so we have several revenue scenarios to present to you that you can contemplate and help us, in essence, choose which one would be most appropriate to include into the May update. As you know, the state budget probably doesn't get finalized till late June, for sure, and it's about a month after we actually adopt the forecast, and at least 2 months after we've gone through all these deliberations and trying to prepare for it. Coupled with that, we have a living, breathing, ever-evolving budget process that we're in the middle of, and that too is a variable that we're going to have to take a snapshot in time of to include in the forecast. I would say as a caveat as we get into this, the forecast really is developed with the best information we have in this snapshot in time, and that we don't want to unnecessarily overreact to some of the numbers that we might see long term, but just know that this is where we are now, and that inevitably, one of the case of state revenues, you'll see tomorrow morning Eric could walk into my office and everything that we know today is different. So as Eric and Scott and I worked on this, we got to a point where we were seeing these scenarios come into place, and all of a sudden realized that we could have potentially 16 or 20 different forecasts to lay out for you, and we thought, well, doing that all in paper would be kind of difficult. So we developed a spreadsheet, interactive spreadsheet here, and hopefully you can see it well on one of the 2 screens. And I'll walk you through the options, and you can see in real time what happens. And this is a different layout, but that's fine. So what we have here are the 5 years of the forecast. Fiscal 17 is the year that we're in. 18 through 21 are all projected. I have done this at a very high level, so I've summarized revenue into 3 categories. It's okay. And expenditures into 3 major categories. And we're dealing with them in millions of dollars at this point. On the ending balance line down here, I have some stoplights, if you will, or indicators, if you will, and that gives you an indication of where those balances are relative to 30 days operating cash. So if you get a green light, you're above 30 days operating cash. And if you're a yellow light, you're somewhere between 15 and 30 days. And if you're a red light, that means you're under 30. You know,
15.
Under 15.
As a driver's ed instructor,
Yeah.
I really like that.
Oh, good, there you go.
Thank you.
Throw that in there. So we begin where we were in essentially December of last year. We have the October 5-year forecast. We were able to update that with the new levy that passed in October. And I throw in there cap at plus 7.5 because that's a critical assumption that we had in that forecast relative to state revenue. On the expenditure side, then it's what we had done back in May and June with the levy committee. That was our levy plan for the 5-year expenditure plan, both personnel and non-personnel. And that's what we included in the October forecast. As you can see, fiscal 21 is slightly negative. To me, it's essentially zero. And that's how we had designed the levy plan, that we would, given the program driving the expenditure side, our best estimates of revenue, and the levy amount that we chose to put on the ballot, we set that millage up such that it would drive 21 essentially to zero. Typically with conservative forecasting, revenues come in a little bit higher, expenditures come in a little bit lower, so you have a better picture by that time. But this was how we were working that through. Also knowing full well that, as far as levy cycle is concerned, the typical 4-year levy cycle, presidential elections during calendar year 20 might be a time that there would be something done on the revenue side, and that affects fiscal 21 as well. For 6 months, you get a half year collection on there. So all in all, using zero as a target. And remember, we talked a lot about should we plan to do the 30-day balance, and that just seemed to be a little bit too much for us to bite off at that point in time. But at least we still have that picture. So that's how this chart, this table is laid out. I also have it in graphical form, although clearly that's not sized right for this presentation.
And Stan, I'm sorry
yeah.
to step out. What was on the prior one, just what's the assumption you're using on the state line?
7.5%.
So you're still staying at 7?
Yeah, because this is the picture at December of 2016. Levy has passed, October forecast is our latest forecast, and that was the only update we did was the revenue side.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
And then,
Huh?
said and
Oh,
then.
and then, so chronologically, what happened after that? Well, all on the revenue side, the first thing that we learned was that the governor's budget proposal came out. And we felt it best to change that assumption to plus 5%. And we also did some updating on the revenue side to reflect 17 as it was coming in that we saw. So we gained a little bit in revenue in 17, and also property taxes are up a bit. I can actually show you those differences. But this was the picture essentially being driven by the reduction from plus 7.5 to plus 5. Instead of being at 0, we're now down to about 32 in the red.
So you
Yes.
said this one has the property taxes, they're higher than the...
A little bit, yeah. We
Okay.
adjusted for May.
Okay.
Because we've got first half settlement numbers in, we've rolled some numbers in forward.
Okay.
And we picked up a little bit. And I can actually show you over here, and again, that's not sized right.
And I apologize, Stan. In the future, if we could just get hard copies, I know sometimes these are interactive documents, but hard copies are always good for eyeballs.
Okay. Even though I was trying to avoid printing out 16 different
Yes.
scenarios.
I think, I think that's part of it.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good, yeah.
This is,
Yeah,
this
I'm
is,
okay with the.
this is the
line.
change from the October forecast just on the revenue side. You can see we picked up some in property taxes this year, so we let that 8.4 flow through, and then some tweaks to pick up another 4 million approximately a year in property tax revenues, okay? So we,
This is a cap, this
Is
is
this-
cap plus 5?
and then this is
Yes.
plus 5 on the cap. So you see that costs us about, that 38 million over the, don't break it.
Don't break it, we don't have any money in the budget for that. Just stay there and hold it like that.
Wow, perfect, thank you, Mike.
Little fun.
Whoa.
At least it was the speaker.
So now,
Wait, Dr. Goodless picked up his foot.
yeah,
Sorry, Paul.
in the back room, the sound guy has just had a concussion. So option 2 on the revenue is an update to 17 revenues. And as that rolls forward for property taxes, to reduce state revenues to +5 from 7.5, and you can see those, that's where the number drops off. And all in all, that drives the cash balance at the end of the year, just about 30 million further in the red.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to come way up front if you wanna see anything.
Yep. Come on up.
This little table here.
You can come right here, there's a spot. Really? No, you can see.
I can see.
You sure? Okay, okay.
This is our little interactive workbook,
Oh,
okay? You'll have to stay after class and
okay.
I'll bring you up to speed. All right, so that was the first thing, was a change in revenue and update for where we saw fiscal 17 going. The next thing we did was to look at expenditures and a couple of changes there. First, I updated 17 to reflect some of the things that we see in the monthly financials. Personnel's running a little bit higher, non-personnel's running under, so I made those adjustments to project 17 out better on the expenditure side. I
So we
left-
should rent it out based on where we are now.
Yes,
Okay.
and when you see in here where I told you that personnel's gonna run, 14, 15 million above, but non-personnel's been running 9 million under and I can show, I'll do that change on that next page too, to show you how, with those differences have factored in. I think we pick up about a 5 million increase in overall cash balance as a result for that, from expenditures. So we update 17. We leave 18 through 21 the same as it was in the October forecast. So we haven't touched that for all the budgeting work that he's done yet. But we did have, when we heard the 5% number as the state, as the governor's proposal, and thinking, well, it's likely a cap. At least that was the thought at the first part. So there was a decision to change the timing on some of the FTE, and that's that personnel piece that we can show you. But it was simply some of the ones that we were going to plan on doing in 18, we just moved them to 21. So all the FTE that was in the levy plan is still in this 5-year period. We just moved the timing around a little bit, and we can pull that up or discuss that now or in a minute. If you want to see it, I can show it to you real quick. Would you like to see it real quick?
Continue going.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Do you want to see it now?
yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
So it keeps the levy
Yeah. Oh,
promise,
is
it
it
just
this-
changed.
You have a
It's
hard
that
copy
sheet
of
right
it.
there.
This one.
Did we, well, okay. I don't know, I think we should look at other alternatives, not just delaying these priorities. I mean, to get this, I mean, you know,
So it may be a both and, because we did make adjustments in other areas. I think one of the internal discussions we had is we were very clear during the levy conversations that it was a total number of positions. The way we would look at budgeting was a fifth, a fifth, a fifth.
right,
But we
right,
would
right.
not deploy that way. We would deploy based upon need. So it could be that you need more special education personnel, you need more safety and security personnel, which means you may have to delay your social workers and your intervention assistants for the priority schools. So it's still in keeping with the promises, the commitment made to the community.
yeah. I guess I just personally, I'd like to see it maybe coupled with
Yeah.
sort of a, non-essential, essential
Right.
program, non-essential program.
And we'll see
or
that too. Yeah.
operational issues, so.
Mhm.
What else could be offloaded to maybe make sure, so we could hire the social workers earlier, or,
So this did accommodate that, so what I hear you saying is maybe even more?
yeah.
So, in this option 2 on the expenditure side, that shifting of the FTE is in there.
Uh-huh.
17 is updated, but 18 through 21 is as it was in the forecast. This brings us back to, if you see here, for FY21, back to 0. So with an update to 17, with a shifting in the personnel, then we've been back to hitting the target that we had in the levy planning of 21 running to 0. And we thought that was an interesting first step to do, to make sure, okay, that seems to be good. The next thing that came along was all the work that the budget managers and Scott were doing in preparing an update to our budget requests. So in March, you heard the presentations from all the budget managers and what the plan was there. So then we combine that with option 3, which is same as option 2. The timing of the FTE, that's been shifted, 17's updated. But now in 18 to 21, these are the revised requests that you had those presentations on. And that then puts us at, because they were above where the forecast was, it puts us at about 30 million in the red for forecasted for 21. In this size of a budget, one might ask me, which deficits get me excited? In that 25, 30 million range, in this size of a budget, I would not, raise, the alarm flag. That can, as I said, conservative forecasting gives us some room there. It can sometimes work itself out. But not a bad picture, considering that if we look at the changes, and I can go over here, this helps. We got the 2 revenue scenarios from the levy at 7.5 assumption to the 5. We have the plan. Now we go to the plan with the updated budget requests. You can see over here in fiscal 17 where I'm anticipating the non-personnel and other financing to come in less, personnel to be over, picks up, overall about 4.7 in cash balance, pick up about 9 million in additional revenue that wasn't in the plan. So not a bad finish to 17, up about 13 million. That's how we like to finish. Again, on the revenue side, reflecting additional property taxes that were just from conservative, forecasting, state being down because of the change in the assumption. And then you can see here personnel, the shift. Now, I will point out in 21, that is, I double counted some changes in 21 back in the levy plan. So that's my error, that's on me. So I pulled that 20 million out. That would be, in this example, 0, because we've just moved folks out of 18 to 21,
Yeah.
okay? So that don't think that there's nothing magical. I simply double counted it. Scott and I are going back through and going, why did that number go up so high in 21? As we dug into it, I double counted.
So what I would ask is on this slide is
Yes.
how, and this is more, I think, a Scott superintendent question, but how much of the non-personnel line could be further reduced to make up the 2.2 that's currently being pushed back?
And that piece we're going through, some of the things that were presented were obviously not included in the November request. One of the things that we've talked about, like there was $1
I
million.
mean, it's hard to talk about in this giant.
Right, well, then we kept it there, because we're working on this with our budget team. One of the things, for example, that jumped out was the WCBE, the investment in
Yes. That's
infrastructure.
what I think of,
That was
like,
not there,
you know.
that's a big ticket item, so we're drilling down into those things that weren't there, that obviously, if we would
When I think
push
about-
that to capital funding, then that obviously is gonna lessen the impact here that we see. Is that what you're looking for?
Kind of, but, with something like, I don't want to, personally, I would define that as a non-essential function. So what are non-essential functions like WCBE or nature centers or other things like that? What are the non-personnel and personnel expenses that go to those programs that are nice, but, as opposed to getting classroom support for classrooms And the 2.2, I think, represents much more directed, like, priority classroom support. I'd rather see what else we can do to find those funds, rather than, you know, not deal, you know, kind of maintain non-essential programs.
And those are conversations that
And when I
we're,
say program, I say that in general, but that,
Right.
I think those things all have personnel and non-personnel and non-capital expenses related.
and those are the conversations we're having with the budget managers now, and, you know, kind of simplify it. We're looking at, you know, people versus things, and which one takes our priority, and where do we invest those dollars? Because some of these things, you know we can scale back, but they, you know, they did ask for some things that we knew we wouldn't be able to fund. Now we're having to go back and even have further conversations, because when we, as Stan mentioned, when we looked at a 7.5% cap gain, now we're looking in the governor's proposal at a 5%. We're gonna have to do things differently just to account for that loss in state revenue. So if everything stayed the same, we've lost money from the state. So we're going back and having those
Yep.
tough, but, you know, good open conversations with our budget managers to say, what do you really have to keep the doors open in the schools? Because the non-essential things, we just may have to put on the back burner for now.
And what we're presenting is a snapshot in time of where we are and where we are in the budget process and what we know about revenue. And
Yep.
and one of the dilemmas we're gonna have at the end of the day is I'm gonna ask all of us here, because next week I have to have a forecast to put on board docs so you guys could see it for the first time in May. And while the forecast is important, we all know that with the uncertainty in state revenue, our budgetary reaction, we're gonna be working on this clear into June.
Yeah.
You know, but we have to put the document together, so I just want everybody to agree, this all seems reasonable, let's put it in the document. I also, if I can for a moment.
I don't disagree with that.
Good.
I don't disagree with that, but I do think, and I think we put it up on board docs, I think we should, you know, flag it, that, you know, put a note on it that, you know, subject to analysis prior to the June budget, and indicate that there's a really ill-timed state law that requires us to have this done before
Yeah.
before we, you know, so we put the cart before the horse.
And 2 years ago, I did some scenario analysis,
Yeah,
just to give us
yes.
an idea. And that was the purpose of this, to give you a magnitude. Here's,
So which one do you? Oh, I'm
well,
sorry.
I knew that question would be raised, but give me a couple minutes on that. Just to put this in, I think, perspective, I was gonna do one comparison, but so far you've seen like a $30 million swing, and Scott mentioned a loss in revenue. It's really a change in assumptions, okay? And I think no matter what the state does, and Eric, you correct me if I'm wrong, anything absent as a flat funding or a reduction, I'm sure the state will say, we're giving schools more money. So let me put this in perspective for you. Our calculated state funding versus our cap state funding, we are, as of this morning, I looked at the most recent April settlement statement, about $87 million into the cap, meaning calculated is $87 million higher than what we actually get when we're capped. That's $87 million a year. This is 28 million over 4 years that we're dealing with. So the magnitude, all the things you talked about, the 2.2 million in personnel, 8 million in FY18 that they are asking for in non-personnel budgets, those all pale by comparison to what the cap has done to us.
So if we got cap relief,
Right.
if we got cap relief, Eric. with some of this, right?
Absolutely. And Eric and I just this morning looked at, we
Can
don't
we
have.
talk about that dynamic between
Yeah.
cap districts and guarantee districts real quickly, just so people sort of understand?
Well, the conversation at the guarantee district is entirely different at their finance committee, where they're going, hi, we're on the guarantee, so we get to draw this line like this.
So
And-
we had
and-
20% relief from the cap, 25% relief from the cap, we wouldn't be having this conversation?
I don't know the percentage, but any relief, yeah, would be helpful. I mean, Bill and I had that conversation 2 years ago, and Bill actually pointed out to me, he said, so if the cap would stay at, I think, 10% at that time, Bill, I think was the conversation, if the cap would stay at 10%, that deficit out there would go away. And I said, that's how the math worked. That's absolutely correct. But I just wanted to give you that perspective. $87 million a year in state funding that we don't get because of the, and I'm going to use the word arbitrariness of the cap. And if we were a guaranteed school district, we'd be able to draw a straight line, even though the calculation would be going down perhaps. And part of that,
So they would be getting money for
students that aren't there.
students who aren't even there.
That's correct.
Essentially, they're
Phantom
locked in.
student funding.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Phantom student funding.
That's certainly a popular phrase. Eric and I looked at it this morning, and we looked at the amount per pupil we get calculated versus the amount per pupil we get on the cap. And that shortfall is as if it about just over 18,000 students aren't funded at all in our district.
That's a lot. That's a
Fair-
whole
fair number?
district In other districts.
Well, the average school district size in Ohio is around 2,700 students right now.
Wow,
so.
yeah, so that's like.
That's a lot of
Unfunded
districts.
district.
So that's what the cap, that's what the, so I just wanted to put that in perspective for you.
Yeah.
This is very important, and we're gonna be talking about $2 million here and $5 million there.
Yeah.
And yet, the state funding picture is 87, I don't mean to beat the dead horse, but that's a huge impact to us, the cap.
Yeah.
And that's, we passed the levy thinking that there'd be a certain level of state funding, and then they
Yeah, so they,
shift
rug
the
out.
ground, and it makes us look like we weren't planning
Yeah,
right.
this is where I get to use my great quote. And I heard this the other day, I can't take any credit for it, it's third-handed, I picked it up from somebody else, but we had a plan. And like Mike Tyson once said, everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face. And so we
I
kind
always
of,
say, playing and the universe laughs.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there we are with updated budgets, 5% on the cap, and let me go back over here to this picture. About 30 million in a deficit.
We should post a forecast with and without the cap.
Sort of in line what Board Member
Oh,
Brown
sorry.
had mentioned to me about doing a, if we get increases like this, we go here. If we get increases like this, and you get this kind of range, I refer to it as a hurricane map, but in financial projections, I think I need to come up with another name, but that's how they do hurricanes. And you see how the impact of compounding out into the future has the effect of, and how big that gap can become. But you're right, it would be interesting to see it with and without the cap.
You know, makes it real to say, the state isn't funding 18,000, they've selected 18,000 Columbus
So we've got that
students
data.
to not fund at all.
Well, we've got that data. We do a calculation of the formula out into the future. Now, with the hundreds of variables in that formula, we pretty much assume some static cases in that, but it gives you a pretty good idea, because we like to know, are we headed to come off the cap or not? Or off the form, go onto the formula and get off the cap, and run the cap the whole way through our projections. But it's interesting. We have the data, we probably could do that.
Well, I'm being somewhat flip, I will defer to the
Okay.
chair.
The next step in this was, okay, we're still there. On the revenue side, as we thought that the governor's proposal sort of set the ceiling on what funding might be historically, what other scenarios should we bring? And this is just, what other numbers would you want to bring? What other percent increases in the cap would you want to see to get an idea of the impact? We picked 3% and 1%. I don't know why. 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have picked 0. As of this morning, I'm not so sure Eric can speak to that. But here is everything that we just talked about, but if it's 3% instead of 5, it pushes us about 100 million in the hole. That's pretty significant. Still, that's the only year of the deficit. 20 is getting down there. It's pretty close. Way below 30 days
I don't
cash.
understand, so what is this, the
Just the
Caps at 3%.
Capped at 3%, everything else is the same as we talked about.
Oh, okay.
That's the only revenue change we make. And then, if you want to do 1%, we now get a deficit in 20.
And keep in mind that the governor and the speaker and the Senate president last week just announced that they're gonna cut another $400 million each fiscal year
Yeah,
at this stage of the game.
Yeah.
That's still, I think they're hoping to head off a downward projection at conference committee, but that's still a possibility as well, is that they may shave $400 million, get to June, and there may be yet another deduction as
Yeah.
well. So 400 million is a lot to try to make up. I know that I don't understand the intricacies of Medicaid funding. I know it's very complicated. I know there's about a $200 million reserve over there. Whether that $200 million reserve is treated the same as the budget stabilization fund, which they've all said we're not touching. So while there's $2 billion plus there, at this point in time, they said we're not going to touch those dollars, which means the 400 million has to come from somewhere. And
They
as you
said
know,
it.
it's Medicaid, then K-12 is
Yeah.
kind of that pecking order for who takes up the chunks of the budget.
right, right.
So this is where I pause in this
Yeah.
presentation and say, this is the chance to give feedback. What are the most plausible combinations that we want to put in the forecast for now, knowing full well that, number one, we won't know state revenue till the end of June. And number two, our expense budget side is an ongoing process. We are revisiting that. And then if you have guidance about that, what would you call it? People versus things balance, that would factor into those activities as well.
I have a question about the community eligibility for the lunch program. Did we make any assumptions about the continuation or any contingencies, or
That's a good
is it factored in at all? Or,
We've assumed no real impact, no difference.
Okay.
We will continue community eligibility as I know it. The impact comes on how, what our poverty level is and how that gets reported, and that's being, I think, worked on.
Potentially.
well, thank you. I just know that that's another factor that's
Mhm.
I just wanted to ask
Jello.
more broadly, whether, we know that the feds are going to be worse than they've been in many years, but again, it's unknown. Is any of that federal money in the general fund? My understanding that it's all outside the general fund, so it's not impacting this.
That's correct.
If there are reductions in federal funds for various other things, does that indirectly affect things? Are we going to want to pick up in the general fund some of the things where we have deficiencies?
Yes, and that's, when we look at those changes in the non-personnel, the stuff, some of the budget requests reflect that. So, because in simplest form, the federal funds are supplemental in nature, but if they go away, if these are programs we want to continue, the only option to do that is here. So
Right.
some of those budget requests that have been presented include picking up those programs.
So those factors are essentially built into this.
On the expense side. Because the revenue would go away, would have to come from existing revenue.
Right. Okay.
Well, we have several scenarios in front of us. And we have to, I think, process-wise, we do have to present something to the state. But I think at the same time that, we have to make sure we're stating, our case in different scenarios. I think to what Board Member Hudson was talking about having, various scenarios up there for people to sort of see, what we would be fully uncapped at, or?
Maybe not scenarios like this so much, but I was thinking more of a, sort of a disclaimer. So if we go to the, sort of the May, that we have new levy cap plus 5%. And right now, the personnel backed up to 20. Then have a disclaimer, we're continuing our budget process, the state funding remains in flux, and we'll await we're awaiting their decision. Number two, that the current state funding formula doesn't pay for 18,000 students, and we hope that the new budget would pay for more. And three, that CCS continues its budget process, and, which we will complete in June.
Yeah, it's sort of a statement of the,
This is a snapshot based on this. Don't take this as our budget. Take this has a lot of moving part assumptions.
right.
Now, should we be moving with the executive proposal, though, at the 5% cap? I guess.
I think right now, because that's what has been posted. I mean, there's speculation.
When do we
underneath
expect
that.
more change in that from the
I mean,
House end? Hasn't
The House
supposed to-
version, I mean, as you know, the clock is ticking, the House probably will have their version out next week, at least in committee, so we'll at least know what they're thinking at this point. Given the bombshell last Thursday, I don't know if that gets delayed anymore. Now, keep in mind, the Senate is itching to get their hands on it because, they can't start really working on the budget until the House has passed theirs, and next week's the last week of April. So, if the House puts it off into that first week of May, that shortens that window for the Senate as well. So, what I've heard, at least prior to this last Thursday, is expect next week that we should see at least the next iteration, which will hit the committee, and then, of course, they'll move things again, and then the House will pass, and the Senate will do what it does. So we still got a couple more iterations, but.
But right now, that's all, I mean, I think that's why we would put this out and.
At the 5% mark?
At the 5%.
But there's going to be time between this point right now and between the board approves it.
Yeah, well, when we talk to the board about it next Tuesday, plus, when it's posted out there, I think we say this is, we know this is still in flux, but rather than lowball it, because a lot could change in that.
My only concern is sticking with the 5%, and this is just, take my 2 cents for all that it is just knowing that the $400 million in cuts, that they've agreed to that. They've not said where they are yet, that $400 million is going to reduce that 5% to me, especially when we know that there's a desire to offset the guarantee. Remember, the guarantee districts, there's actually a reduction. They weren't even 100% guaranteed. Some of those districts went to 95%. And the House was saying before we even hit that they wanted to rectify that. There's a cost to doing that as well. That costs money. I think, well, the 5% is what is known. I think that the likelihood of that remaining is probably unlikely. But again, that's just my.
I think we could disclose that, but until we know, it isn't certain. But I think it's an opportunity for us to do some education that could dip, and we also, there's still a cap there, and the cap, in addition to that, the cap hurts us even more. And we know that, so if either of those change, that could, if say the state amount goes down, but the cap
comes up.
reduces, that could
Yeah.
help us,
Yes.
right?
Correct. If all things being equal, because the funding formula components are frozen, if any movement in the cap benefits us, no matter what they do within the components of the formula, that is correct.
Any upward movement.
Any upward movement.
Yeah.
And any upward movement of the cap benefits us. Thank
Yes,
you
right,
for
yeah.
clarifying. So as the cap does this, we stand to
Bigger
benefit,
impact.
no matter what happens within the constructs of that particular formula, because again, we're limited by whatever that cap amount may be.
And our analysis too is a relative one to our previous assumption of 7.5.
Right.
When we say any movement in the cap helps us, when we say, well, we did 1.5, Yeah, from our planning purposes, though, it requires us to have a reaction because our assumption prior was 7.5. And so it would be, you know,
Yeah, so we take it.
we need to move, what we want is a cap movement closer to or above 7.5 that helps us out. That gets us moving closer to our calculated amount and more to the ultimate state of not being on a cap, which is something the governor said. And I believe even Budget Director Keene had said, you need to let the formula do its work. You have a formula. And I'm like, absolutely. Take my 87 million
Yeah.
in small bills.
Eric?
Don't quote me on that, please.
Your suggestion that we not go as conservatively as we could, what's the, I guess, just what's the value in doing it that way rather than being more conservative?
Because I think it's all speculative right now. And this is, I think that, candidly, I think this is a ridiculous requirement. To do this type of planning before, you know, this is like cart
It
before
is.
the horse. It's ridiculous. So, but that's where I think we should put disclaimers on here that this is still very much in flux. So this isn't our budget, you know, and the budget planning, I think, should be more conservative.
Okay.
I think we should be conservative but not alarmist.
Okay. Yeah, I like the disclaimers, and yes, I think on the budget side, we do need to be very conservative.
I mean, we should be planning for the
Yeah.
1, 3, 5. But, and I think we should, you know, this is an opportunity to educate on the, you know, how much the cap adversely affects
Yeah.
us, how much more the cap adversely affects us.
Yeah, I think that too would be good,
Uh-huh,
the public with our
yeah.
legislators.
But I just thought out of the box, just to
Okay.
like go clear down when because I think then it sends a signal to the legislature, well, if they're only planning 1%, let's just fund them 1%. Then they're planning for it,
Hence our budget.
yeah.
Is the logic on the cap that the larger districts have economy of scale, or what's the, it's,
Not as many of people in Columbus vote for the leadership in the legislature.
The cap actually is a function of how the funding runs through ADM. Actually, in central Ohio, I think all but like 2 or 3 districts are actually on the cap. And it's because we've seen population growth. And it's because ADM, or average daily membership per students, drives the components of the formula. That's where you see a lot of that. So areas that have growth,
are
you know,
punished? Or,
are capped. You know, they're capped because
We can go
because
with
we have to
punish.
pay, essentially you have to pay for the districts to not lose funding under the formula. So as the treasurer alluded to,
Guarantee is what it's to do.
yes, it helps fund the guarantee, and as the
They
treasurer
get-
alluded
they get a
to,
ceiling, or
you
they
know,
get a floor and we get a ceiling.
the OBM director, the budget director essentially said it protects the state when they do caps and guarantees from the policy decisions that they make within a formula, because they don't let the formula actually work.
Okay. It's like, okay, then can we send some of our students to those guaranteed districts so they can use some of their extra
Yeah,
to
exactly.
educate? You know? It's-
We'll do a little joint venture with those districts.
So I guess at this point, we have a decision to make then, what we sort of want to put out then for the board for its May forecast. I agree with MJ on having a disclaimer and having a piece and talking about this process. It is silly that we have to do a 5-year forecast before the budget's even done and putting forth assumptions in a legal document for the public to consume, especially when it comes to school finance. It's already confusing enough for the public.
And for the legislature, I don't want the
And this
legislature, I think we
this
want to tell
damages our
them,
credibility.
5% isn't enough for us, but here's what we could live in, and tell them, you know, if you guys work on that cap a bit, that'll help us even more.
Mhm.
we've shared the cap with the delegate, with members of the delegation.
Oh, I understand, but I just think this is our sort of official planning statement. And I just think it's important, our official planning statement encourage more support than less. I think our internal planning should plan for everything. Well, not everything, but, you know, be as conservative as possible.
So I think what I hear, that you get a revenue and then an expense option. And what I hear is at least an acknowledgement that what we put in, let's just talk expenditure side, what we put into the forecast on the expenditure side, you all understand that between now and June, there'll be some modifications to that. And balancing not only the absolute magnitude of the number, but also the allocation within non-personnel and personnel. And that come June, when you're presented with an appropriation resolution, that will likely be also just one piece of this 5-year budget process, and then we'll factor that into yet another update, probably, given that this is, the state budget's so important. You know, I think in August, we can come back to FAC and say, hey, now, 3 months down the road, this is what we know. Here's our expenditures, here's what the state budget did. And this will be, August is when I begin to prep for the October forecast, so you might be able to get a little spoiler alert kind of a thing, a little precursor to what that next October forecast would be.
Right.
So that's what I'm hearing from you, when we pick the expenditure, you know that tomorrow that can all be different.
Absolutely.
Secondly, on the revenue side, the question lies, what do you want? Do you want to be real conservative, which I don't want to say presents not a doomsday projection, but, you know, be more conservative because of our fears about state budgeting? Or, I think what I heard you say was, what we know right now, the only proposal out there is 5%.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, listen to the message and say that's what we expect them to do. It still has a negative impact.
It's still a
Still
not
reduction,
enough,
it's still a reduction.
But that's what
and
you
it's still
said,
negative.
so that's what I'm hearing, and,
And I think that, you know, for, again, internally, it doesn't sound like we're sitting on our hands with that, and that's good. And so we have to stay engaged, I think, for the committee and other folks, if we have to get together, we get other information, we have to recast this again, we do that.
so, I'm not usurping your job as chair here, but it sounds like option 2 on the revenue side is where you are.
I would be comfortable with that,
Was that the 5%?
the 5%.
Eric, are you good with that?
And include the
But I think
items as
including the- yeah.
disclosures, so that,
Disclosures are for, you know, what we present to the board, what you put on the website. It's not going to actually be on this official
There'll be
document.
27 pages of notes, in which
Yeah.
we will disclose a lot more than
Yeah.
just that.
Mhm.
But I'm envisioning a synopsis of those, I'm listening, trying to.
I-
And I know that in board docs and what we put out there for board legislation will be all of our comments about the state of the situation that we're in right now. What we know, what we don't know. And including in that, a comment about the impact of not only the changes in the assumptions about the cap, but the cap in and of itself. And it wouldn't be difficult to do a calculation and say, just so you wordsmith it here, but just so you know, a forecast, if we run the calculation, would be this, or there'd be an additional $87 million a year, which is 4 times that, which is $350 million.
Currently,
whatever.
state law
Yeah.
caps our revenue at X%. And so, you know, at existing funding, that amounts to X dollars, or approximately 18,000 students that are completely unfunded by the state. You know, if that formula would be changed, that also could have an impact on this forecast.
Happy with that.
And I'll draft that up and
Mhm.
run it by some of you to make sure I catch the essence of all of that. That makes sense. On the expenditure side,
Is this the one with the 8.5 in and the 30 in still, or is this the one with those out? Remind me. Scenario 2. 8.5 in?
Well, that's just, scenario 2 is just the revenue. The expenditure one that's up there is the budgets as they were presented. back
8.5 in
the
and
8.5
30.
in.
In the movement of the 30 from 18 to 21.
So it does still have those moved,
Yes.
shifted, okay.
But still knowing that this is going to change once we get.
Oh, absolutely, it always does.
Yeah.
And we did, I mean, we prepared multiple scenarios, one at absolutely no increase, one with a minor increase, one with reductions actually too. So we're not gonna put those out there because everybody will say, live with it.
Well, exactly,
Right.
exactly. And I think, we're already living with the
Yes.
cap. And we're trying to eke out, the levy was about, getting additional
Yes,
student support.
exactly.
And so there's the state saying, okay, well, let's just take away even more. And
Gain ground.
I don't think we need to, tell them a story that says, we're just gonna roll over.
Well, then do we have a recommendation then to move forward with option 2?
This is option 2.
Well, option 2 on revenue, option 3 in expenses. This is number 3 on expenses. Option 2 on expenses is the forecast, the October forecast, which are lower. You want to see the two of them again?
Yeah, real quick.
Kind of Sort of the eye doctor test here, option 1, A or B. So
So you're doing revenue now?
now I'm doing expense,
Expenditures.
revenne's done.
Option 2 for
You all
residents.
said
Oh, I'm sorry,
5%.
expenditures, yes, yes, yes,
5% growth in
Yep.
the cap,
Yep.
okay? Option 2 on expenditures, the FTE's been moved from 18 to 21, they're still in there. Updated 17, but 18 to 21 is as it was back in October. So the budgets you heard in March aren't in here. This is what the budget work that was done
And that again.
a year ago.
So Stan, can we be clear?
Yes.
Just to clarify, when you said the positions have been moved, 73 are still added. It's the 30 that we've shifted.
Yeah.
73 are still there.
Okay,
So it's
good.
not like they've all been shifted
Okay,
over.
good.
Oh, and that's, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
mean, that's an
Yes.
important distinction, so.
Yeah, see,
Oh, there it is, thanks, I'm
The
sorry.
initial
On that-
impact
on that
Yeah.
that we felt at the beginning of the
But
levy period.
there are some that I mean, I think
Okay,
but I think those are budget decisions that'll occur
Yeah, yeah.
before June. And so right now, those haven't occurred yet, so it wouldn't be appropriate to put them in the May forecast, which is again,
Right.
the curse of the timing.
Yep. And we don't want to make a commitment and then go out and hire only to have to turn around and reduce in force and pay unemployment for a year.
Right,
So,
right,
because
right.
we've made absolutely no gain then, so we have
Yeah.
to be tactical in terms of how we do this and transparent. So we don't want to go out there and say, we're going to bring them all on board and then not be able to do that. So it's a balancing act.
Right.
And we've got that. And we are looking at the non-personnel very, very closely. We're also looking at the sale of buildings fund and the building use funds to understand how those could pay for things like the 1.3 million in transportation to acquire new buses, for example, or some of the maintenance pieces. Not really WCB, that was more symbolic to indicate we have an asset and we have to take care of that asset, but that's another capital eligible expense. City year,
And it'll be helpful, I think, on that one, for example, once we have the capital,
Yeah.
once we have a capital
Yeah.
budget, it'll be,
yeah.
that will lift that up,
It
those
will.
type of issues out for better
will.
planning and conversation,
It will.
debate.
So both of these expenditure scenarios have the FTE moved.
Okay.
The only difference is March budgets versus the October forecast. The March budgets present a deficit position greater than what I would call 0 per se. But it does reflect the needs as they presented them back in March and makes a statement about, and we expect 5% from you guys.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
From a macro, high level, I'm okay with the reasonableness of that, of the forecast. I know full well that the expenditure side will be different, some allocation issues, and then maybe reductions. And certainly will be changed because of what the state ultimately comes in. So I'm okay with this being a reasonable snapshot in time.
and this takes into account the budget request, option
Yes.
3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think it just sends, the strong message, passing a levy, budgeting appropriately, working with what we have and moving forward to move the district forward. I think we stay on course with that, because that's what we said to the community we were going to do,
Right.
to enhance education.
Right.
So 2 and 3.
I just wrote it down on my concrete tablet here.
Do we need a vote on that?
I think, do we need, some sort of vote to recommend the report to include option 2 on the revenues and 3 on the expenditures, the board? With all appropriate disclaimers.
Can I just ask, I mean, everybody's clear, right, that we have fulfilled our commitment to the
Absolutely.
community
Yeah.
in terms of personnel we're
I was
adding.
not as clear earlier, and I appreciate the
Well,
clarification.
I'm really doing this more for Bill than anybody else,
Yeah, yeah,
because one of the things he had asked me before is how are we going to be accountable to the community? And this is how we're doing it. We added 73 positions. That's what we said we would do. And so we have done that, and we budgeted for that. So
You got the chart, didn't
we
you?
were so focused on those positions that have shifted, it made it sound like we didn't add any positions, and we did in fact.
I was looking
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the blue
yeah.
column before I looked
Gotcha.
at the,
The peach,
um,
the Easter peach color, no? The
persimmon color, the persimmon column.
persimmon,
boy.
persimmon, there you go.
I haven't heard that in a while. Maybe like once before in my whole life.
And absolutely, we'll look
Sorry.
at the non-personnel and see where we could go ahead and even do more earlier. So understanding those personnel have compounding effects too, so.
Yes.
But I think that's part of our budget discussion.
Yep.
That For this, I think this is a good faith forecast.
Yep.
But also I think we need to put the statement out there as other decision makers are looking at the district to say, we're slimming down and this is,
We're slimming down. according to
and
what
we're carrying some of your other policy load.
Yes,
So
that's what I wanted to ask
don't
about
cut us
that.
further.
Kind of to your very first agenda item, maybe when we look at additional members or even new members and replacement members for FAC, maybe we give some consideration to having someone with that state level perspective, someone from ODE. I mean, wouldn't it be eye-opening for someone from ODE's budget office to actually sit through these meetings and understand how those seemingly small decisions made at the State Department of Education have huge implications? I mean, like you pointed out, in the community eligibility program, when they award those additional dollars, we don't get those,
Yeah.
but they do go to the non-district providers. And it was very clear in our conversations with Aaron that they didn't understand that when they made that decision. It was never accommodated in that decision.
And
So maybe participating in this, we would be helping them develop as well.
I would like
Just a
that.
thought.
I'm
I'm sure they'll be ready and willing to volunteer.
I think they could probably sit in ex officio. We would
Sure.
love to have their perspective.
I would even love someone from Tom Keene's office to sit here, frankly, just to begin to understand that. So
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
we're the largest district. If, this would be a good place for them to kind of cut their teeth on understanding
Yep.
the granularity of the impact.
So,
So
I'll put
recommend-
forward a motion and that we would put forward 2 and 3 with the disclaimers that we talked about as our initial draft forecast to put forward for the board.
I'll second that. Okay, good. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. All right. Score.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you very
Yes,
much.
yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, so we have our meeting minutes, we have a recommendation for the forecast and the personnel piece. So now we can move on to the last item on the agenda, that would be the monthly financial, which we had started briefly.
I do have a question.
Oh, sure.
After that. that we can
No,
just-
what's your question now?
Well, I was at a civic association meeting last week, and so people were asking about the Easton to Linden tax. Basically, that now that's Easton dollars that aren't coming to the school district. So, they feel like, well, now other residents have to bear a bigger piece of the, the funding. And so I think the question was, is the school being consulted when these kind of arrangements are happening? And whether it's a large dollar amount or just the optics of it, people feel like, okay, so here's basically city council making a decision that affects the school district. And, people are saying, well, we just passed a levy, now giving away a certain pocket of money, how's that going to affect the overall? So I guess my question is, I was in this as a resident and I wanted to be able to respond to it, but I was like, well, that's a good point. So,
Well, when it came to this particular issue, the board did not vote on it based on the way state law is written around CRAs. And I think that you saw a lot of us sort of questioning the process and wanting to make sure that everyone is at the table when it comes to these sort of decisions. Now, when you say revenue lost, the district is not losing revenue. It's not like we're taking money that exists. Maybe when you're talking about future revenues, I think it's not us losing revenue. It's development of an area, and since it's 100% abated, it's not that revenue that would.
because it didn't
come-
exist
didn't
until it got
exist.
developed, is what you're
Correct.
saying. Okay, that's a
Correct.
good point.
And then
Yeah, so it's
Dr.
diverted
Roush-
for a period of time and then comes back.
And then
hopefully.
Dr. Roush, and you can speak to this as well, during that process, we raised that as, I did as a board member, and the district had begun to talk to the city about having a process where we would have quarterly updates, not necessarily with a board member, but with, staff,
Mhm.
folks like Dr. Roush. They'll be working with the city to discuss these sort of issues as they come up, how it impacts
Okay,
us.
good.
Yeah. How does it impact our facilities? What sort of development is this to begin with? Just so we can stay above and prepared
That's good.
and at the table with them.
And Councilwoman Brown, or Councilmember Elizabeth
I
Brown,
don't
I
think
guess,
this is really
she
much of a-
addressed it.
This is,
In that
when
way.
it comes to development, it's more of an area of the administration in the mayor's office. City council doesn't sit with development and go through these projects at all, quite frankly. So this would be one of the mayor's cabinets that we would be having a relationship
Well,
with.
she was on the hotspot. She was at the meeting and had to address that. And she basically said what you said, that you're not,
They would need to have
It's not
they would have to
missing
change the way that
income.
they operate to incorporate city council in this process in the front end, I guess. I can't speak to that, I don't know how they operate. But it's currently, it goes to the mayor's office, it's an administrative
Right.
cabinet.
well, thank you. And I think that's what they were just saying, is that it's sort of like two taxing entities that maybe at times.
We just want to be,
Not
it's good to be at the
coordinated.
table with these sort of things.
Okay.
And we were able to do that and had conversation with them, look forward to doing it in the future. We always invite the public and our partners to the table with us, whether it's early childhood or any other endeavor, so that we work together. I, as a board member, expect the same relationship when it comes to those sort of issues as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Roush, you want to add anything?
I think you've said it very eloquently.
It's a,
I'll have a
it's a
better
different,
response.
Stan and I are old. Stan's older than me, but we're both old. And so, but we've lived through the eras where the only way you can really attract development, particularly to areas in need of development, is to offer those sorts of abatement requests. And the most palatable way, I believe, you can look at that as you're investing in a future revenue. Obviously, you're foregoing the current new taxes there, but you're going to collect what you've always collected on that parcel. So you're not losing anything, exactly like Board Member Preddy said, but Stan actually has a schedule of when those roll off, in 10, 12, 15 years, and how much new revenue will be
Okay.
coming in as a result of those investments. But developers don't locate. They don't come to places where they don't have those opportunities as much.
Well, and that's what my neighbors said.
Yeah.
It was like, does
Why would they?
Easton really need
Unless they
a
have-
CRA incentive to
Unless
build
they're highly
there?
ethical and altruistic people. Churches, maybe. Synagogues, whatever.
Well, thank you. I mean, and when you look at that map over there, you realize what a huge district it is, and so it's like, yeah, it's hard to have
I thought that
anything
was
that's a
an island.
blanket.
It's a Rorschach test.
I'm like, what is that?
A blanket approach. Thank you, and that's, but people read things in the paper, and then that means, that that's happening at a wide scale in their minds, so, all right, enough on
That's a
that.
good point.
All set?
Thank you.
So as we return to the financial report for March, I believe this is where we left off. Revenues are running about 27 million over plan. As you can see here, it's 748 million. Expenditures are slightly under plan, 5 million, very, very close on 627 million. You can see on property taxes, we're up. Again, first half tax collections include the new levy. This is pretty much as expected. State revenues right on target. I think the other operating, that was no change from last month. And non-operating, that's where we have these advances, transfers that occur. We plan at one level, and typically they come in, pretty much significantly under, which is what this is demonstrating. Some of these are the variances that I then factored into to the forecast for those numbers to be up or down, as the case may be. That just gives you a perspective of the four large categories, one to another. And then month to month, you can see the biggest variances is during collection period there in January, February, March, and how those work themselves out. And that just has to do with advances from one year to the next. But overall, we did come in with the new property taxes as expected. On the expenditure side, personnel has increased again this month by about 1.9 million. That was a similar increase over the previous month. And again, that's walking towards or moving towards that 27th pay in June. We still think this will end about 16 million over plan. So we'll see where that works out. We're going to have other variances on the favorable side in the other categories, non-personnel and other, that will help to offset that. So as you can see, non-personnel is currently at 9 million under plan, non-operating at almost 6 million under plan. So we got overall expenditures about 4.7 under. That's the number that actually shows up, that 4.7 under is the net number that shows up in that forecast. So that's a snapshot of time. That's the best info I had. I'll mention community schools. No change in that forecast. 180 million is appropriated. The latest number is about 178 million from the state, so we expect that to run under plan ultimately by the end of the year. But that was a very good projection for us. And I think we honed in on a projection for the forecast pretty well using trend data. And that's what we're doing. We're just trending this because we don't have a good predictor. But people say, well, how many students do you think are going to leave next year? And I said, well, trend would say this, because I don't, there's not a cause and effect model that I've got for reaching out and figuring out why kids come or go. So we just do it on a trend basis. But that number's real good. And in your MD&A, you can see all this data as it rolls forward every month. So month to month, doing pretty good. Last year is a fairly good predictor for this year. But overall, it's expenditures are pretty much on target, slightly under, that's where we expected at the end of the year. Revenues slightly over. Again, when you think about it, we'll be within, absent the new levy, I mean, we'll be within 1% or so, and that's on $800 million. It's pretty good. And that's it for March.
That's a very good, quick financial report. I appreciate that, Stan.
Certainly.
So we already discussed we're not going to have the April 25th meeting. We did get through everything else in the budget. Now, we don't have a quorum anymore, so we'll just finish up with the day. I guess just stay tuned just over the next month as we continue to go through the budget process and how this all plays out. And on the policy level, you know, what sort of, I hate to say ideas, the board has when it comes to some of the expenditure that we had discussed earlier on how we could tighten up. So options, yeah, you know, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, you know, things that we can continue, you know, because I think people forget, like, you know, in the levy, we add things in there because the state doesn't fund us a certain way. And, you know, we're picking up the slack for them already. And, you know, we need to continue what we promised to do. But at the same time, if there is anything that we can do, we should explore that. Like closing down high schools. Just kidding.
I mean, really, the bottom line, the motto is raise the cap, and it solves so much for us.
In the likelihood of that, I mean, this is just, you know, I think we have a good opportunity really just to sort of, you know, this is a way for us to say, hey, look, this funding formula doesn't work. It doesn't work for school districts across the state. This is something that's been changing. We play within the rules. We're playing by your rules, and then you go ahead and change them literally every 2 years or add more complexities to the game. You know, school districts deal with this, and I think that we have the ability and the platform to, you know, call them out on their game and pull it apart, break it apart on their argument that this doesn't work for school districts. And it's a tough game to pass levies. And, you know, I can explain school funding. The formula is like the engine, and the levy is like the fuel. And you know, we have a junky engine that doesn't take into account all the different components, mechanics that are needed, and the fuel is very low octane. It doesn't seem to go very far. But you know, just stay tuned. We're going to continue keeping our eyes on this and what ways we can do to improve it. And really, again, just thank you to everybody for making time today, coming in here today. I know it was we had to do our job as board members to make sure, you know, that we keep people on these committees. So I look forward to, you know, working through the next few months on making sure that we fix that issue moving forward. So that's really all I have for today.
Hey, did I hear correctly, April 25th is out, right?
Yeah, we don't need it at this point. But again, it's just a few days away. And we were able to settle on some forecast numbers, so
Yes.
now we just have to go through our process as a board. So they should just change the law for 5-year forecasts to be done in August in an odd number of years.
I've written it down already, so.
Well, you know,
That's that's an easy fix.
the interesting thing about the forecast in all the years that I was in when it first started, and, you know, I took a break, and then I'm back in again. And it went from a document that everybody went, oh, okay, to kind of an oh my God moment. And we went from not really understanding what value it had and its place, to, and I'll say it, I think sometimes placing too much value on it. So we always worry as managers of that process that you don't want to create a crisis where there isn't one, but you also don't want to create a picture and then down the road have to have this big correction. So the fact that we're on a 5-year time horizon and the state's on a 2 doesn't fit well for us. You know, if they want to help, give me a 4-year number instead of a 2-year number. That would help greatly. Because we pretty much know what, once property taxes are set, we pretty much know what they're going to do. That minimal growth, for whatever reason, is minimal. State, we don't know. So you get a kind of a potential knee-jerk reaction every 2 years, which is not good. So you're faced with what I call, you know, type 1 and type 2 errors. Do you put a favorable revenue projection in place, which might cause you to set in motion expenditure programs that, because the state number doesn't come through, you have to turn them off and then disappoint everybody. And in personnel, that means bringing people on and then laying them off. That's not a good
Yeah.
response. The flip side of that is being more conservative in the revenue side, not having the dollars available. You don't put programs into place, and 2 years down the road, that money actually does come through. Somebody says to you, well, hey, we could have started that 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So there's two different ways that we can get hit in the face, even though we had a plan. I knew I'd work my way around back to that quote. And today was very interesting conversation. We didn't necessarily end up where I thought we would, but that's okay. Because it's all just a snapshot in time of what our best really guess almost is at this point. So interesting process.
I like that we didn't go with, you know, assuming zero growth, because then they say, oh, well, you came up with a budget like that, now you gotta live with it. And we shouldn't have to, you know, be that prepared.
Yeah, I
In
think we
other
should be
words, yeah.
proactive in our conversation
Yes.
with this.
Show what we want to do,
And if we have to change it, we have to change it,
yeah.
which will definitely happen if we have to change it. And we have the
Well, yeah.
and we have the platform to do it, and, you know, we had the
So we
means.
got the spreadsheet.
Correct. So then I think it's just our job to talk to the
Yeah.
community, our lawmakers, and our folks in the media, and make sure they understand
Yeah.
this. This is the most important thing.
Well, thank you. This
No
is,
Okay?
I thought after we passed our
I
levy,
think
we
you
wouldn't
just
have
adjourn
any
the meeting
sad
or something.
Adjourned.
Yeah.